Hello, welcome to today's HealthLine webinar from the American Association of Kidney Patients titled Understanding the Importance of Kidney Transplant Silent Rejection, an AAKP HealthLine Innovator webinar sponsored by Eurofins Transplant Genomics. My name is Erin Kahle, and I am AAKP's Director of Patient Insights, Data Analytics, and Advocacy. I oversee our patient research and education activities, as well as our grassroots engagement activities, including our Ambassador Initiative, which falls under our Center for Patient Engagement and Advocacy. AAKP's HealthLine webinars fall under our Center for Patient Research and Education. We believe patient and caregiver education is an integral part of treatment and protection of patient lives, and we work to ensure that the patient has a central role in research and guidance that are designed to determine optimal approaches and strategies for providing healthcare services, assistance programs, and access to new products and services. We built this center with the latest polling and engagement technologies to ensure that kidney patients take a central role in informing the federal, academic, and private sector research shaping the next generation of healthcare services, assistance programs, and innovative new treatments. We encourage you to respond to our flash surveys and other engagement opportunities that you receive via email. I'd like to start out today with a special message from our webinar sponsor, Eurofins Transplant Genomics.
Rejection is a reality all kidney transplant recipients should be aware of. There are several types of rejection. Two common ones are clinical acute rejection and silent rejection, also known as subclinical acute rejection. Clinical acute rejection is what most people think of when they hear kidney rejection. An increase in serum creatinine levels suggests your transplanted kidney is not working as well as it was previously. Subclinical acute rejection is the earliest form of rejection that your transplanted gene expression blood test, oftentimes going undetected, hence the term silent. Historically, silent rejection could only be detected through an invasive needle biopsy procedure. However, there are now non-invasive options available, including the OmniGraft gene expression blood test. By detecting and properly treating silent rejection, your transplanted kidney may avoid significant damage. However, if subclinical acute rejection is left undetected, this may result in a whole host of side effects, leading to worse long-term outcomes of the transplanted kidney. With non-invasive options, such as the OmniGraft gene expression blood test, you can gain peace of mind, knowing that your transplanted kidney is not silently rejected. To learn more about silent rejection, please visit getaheadofrejection.com.
The content of this program, as presented, and financial support of this webinar was provided by Eurofins Transplant Genomics. As the oldest and largest patient-led kidney patient organization in the U.S., AAKP is proud to host this innovator webinar as a service to the expanding national and global communities of patient consumers and their families, medical practitioners, researchers, and policymakers following innovation and advancements in kidney care and treatment. AAKP is an aggressive supporter of innovation to change status quo care. While this activity is an approved educational webinar, AAKP does not endorse this webinar nor endorse or promote any specific commercial entities or products. And thank you again to Eurofins for sponsoring this webinar. With that, let's get started. We have a great program today, and I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. Juston Weems grew up in Lubbock, Texas. He attended Texas Tech University for undergraduate school, then attended Oklahoma City University, where he played collegiate soccer. He graduated with a biology major and chemistry minor. He went on to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center for his master's and PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology, where he studied obesity and type 2 diabetes. After graduation, he moved to Kansas City for a postdoctoral fellowship at the Stowers Institute for Medical Research. As a postdoctoral fellow, he studies molecular mechanisms of DNA damage in skin cancer. He remained at the Stowers Institute after his postdoctoral fellowship and a senior research associate until joining Transplant Genomics in March 2020. Juston currently lives in Prairie Village, Kansas, with his wife, Lauren, son Benjamin, and 2 English cream golden retrievers, Sven and Kristoff. Shane Moore's journey with kidney disease started in 2000 from a car accident. Due to the chronic kidney disease from hypovolemic shock, he decided to go to nursing school. He graduated from nursing school in 2006, worked in cardiac ICU, cath lab, liver transplant, and currently in heart transplant. In 2014, his kidneys failed and he started home hemodialysis. After several family members were tested and deemed unacceptable by his transplant team, his best friend was tested and became a match. In 2015, Shane received a kidney transplant. After many years of no issues, he randomly asked for a cell-free DNA test, which showed elevated levels and led to further testing. After the tests, it was revealed that he was in subacute antibody-mediated rejection, and 2 rounds of treatment were done in 2020. Since treatment, his cell-free DNA has been stable, and TrueGraph has been a treatment despite his antibodies being elevated. We are pleased to have both Juston and Shane here today, and I now turn things over to Juston to start the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining today, and also thank you for this webinar and everybody coming to show their support for the patients and for the patient advocacy groups that are out there. All right, so this is really about understanding the importance of kidney transplant, silent rejection, and just sort of an introduction and an overview of what Transplant Genomics has done through innovation and work that we are really proud of, and data-driven process as a company that we've been able to hopefully move the needle and affect not only kidney health, but also help patients have a better alternative to invasive biopsies and also have a better understanding of their kidney health as they move forward in their journey. So the agenda today, of course, we just went through the introduction. I'll give you a little bit about Transplant Genomics, who we are and what we do as a company. And then we'll walk right into the rejection basics, talking about not only the rejection landscape, but the types of rejection, how often does it happen, and also the complications if left untreated, how we can hopefully bump the biopsy and move towards less invasive and more patient-friendly assays and testing that we can do forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about our newest innovation, which is OmniGraph test that's commercially available right now. And then I will hand it over to Shane for his patient perspective as one of our patient ambassadors. And then we'll talk a little bit about where you can learn more information and give you a little more updates moving forward. We'll go ahead and say that the views and opinions expressed in the following PowerPoint slides are those of the individual presenter and should not be attributed to the American Association of Kidney Patients, AAKP, its directors, officers, employees, volunteers, or members. Those are the speakers today, myself and Shane. And again, my involvement here at TGI, I'm the director of R&D, so I drive a lot of the innovation, and my team does, of the innovation that we have going on here at Transplant Genomics. We also run the commercial lab and do the actual lab testing here in Lee Summit, Missouri, which is just right outside of Kansas City. So who is Transplant Genomics? So we are a Eurofins company. So Eurofins Transplant Genomics, sometimes called TGI. And we're a personalized diagnostics company committed to improving organ transplant outcomes worldwide through innovative tests. And this innovation in these tests can be used to detect early signs of graft injury, help differentiate among actionable causes, and also help to enable optimization of therapies and treatments. We were acquired by Eurofins Scientific in 2019. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about us, please check out our website at transplantgenomics.com/about. So we'll walk right into this rejection basics. And really, I think it's important to understand the challenges that the body faces despite the life-saving gift of an organ. All immune systems are designed to be protective. And what this means is that essentially every organ that gets transplanted is trending towards rejection. And the question for that is, why are they trending towards rejection? And our bodies and our immune system do not recognize or do not understand the difference between a life-saving organ that came from another person or a life-threatening invader that could possibly cause bodily harm. So both of these are sort of treated in the same manner, which are attacked by the immune system. And so we use a range of immunosuppression medications to combat this response. And despite the challenges that sometimes come with using immunosuppression drugs, do find that the benefits obviously outweigh the potential risks or the potential complications that come with that. But trying to find the optimal way to balance the immune response to allow patients to maintain a healthy immune response to germs, bacteria, viruses, that sort of thing, but also balancing avoiding rejection is a critical way of doing this. And so some of the common signs of rejection that you may be familiar with include fever and other flu-like symptoms, sometimes pain, tenderness, or swelling in the kidney area. There are weight changes, decrease in urination, and sometimes fatigue. So monitoring and maintaining all of the proper immunosuppression medications can help maintain this kidney health, but also monitoring the graft itself is really what we're talking about today. So when we use the term rejection, really we have two types of rejection that we're talking about. So what is the difference between the two types of rejection? The first type of rejection is clinical acute rejection. So this is a rejection, as mentioned in the video, that people traditionally think about, that by the time sufficient kidney injury has been occurring and done so to cause an increase in serum creatinine levels, usually that correlates with significant damage to the kidney that's already occurred. At this point, this is what we call clinical acute rejection. And this is where a patient can experience a rejection at any given time, but there's an indicator of the serum creatinine levels that something is happening. Silent rejection or subclinical rejection is a rejection that first happens silently or initially not causing enough damage for your kidney to actually cause serum creatinine levels to rise. So this subclinical acute rejection or sub-AR is a kind of rejection that's not detected with routine lab monitoring like serum creatinine, because this is happening sort of before anything else is going on. So how common is this silent rejection? So we are at Transplant Genomics a very data-driven company. We put our innovations on the back of science, and we really try to push forward in robust data sets and robust clinical trials. So looking at some of our clinical trials that we've done in the past, we found that silent rejection is fairly common. 3 months after transplant, sub-AR rejection occurs in about 20% of patients with stable serum creatinine. Again, that means that the creatinine levels aren't really changing, and so you can't really tell that something's happening. 12 months after transplant, subclinical rejection occurs at about 25% of patients, and overall subclinical acute rejection occurs in up to 35% of patients with stable serum creatinine at some point in the first 24 months after transplant. So overall, it's about a 25% prevalence of patients that can experience subclinical rejection, and there's no way of detecting this subclinical rejection without an invasive biopsy. So how do we reassess then this rejection landscape? So silent rejection, again, is the earliest form of rejection that we can detect. A later form, again, that one that I talked about earlier, clinical acute rejection, is common. It does affect about 10 to 15% of patients in the first year post-transplant. But again, unlike silent rejection, our clinical acute rejection has always been detected with routine serum creatinine blood levels. So you see serum creatinine creeping up, you have an indicator of something that's going on. Silent rejection is important because detecting silent rejection, it can ultimately lead to preventing acute rejection later on, or sort of saying it a different way, untreated subclinical acute rejection can potentially lead to clinical acute rejection later on and a whole host of complications. So these complications that can occur in the form of kidney scar tissue that decreases our kidney function. We can end up with ultimately having chronic rejection, which can be part of graft loss, and then also antibody development, which can lead to a really strong response to the immune response in trying to attack the graft as a foreign invader. What is Transplant Genomics doing to help with this problem and to be looking at this problem? So on our innovation, what we've done is that we understand that the earlier silent rejection is identified or ruled out, the sooner you get back on the path of healthy living. Historically, silent rejection has only been detected by an invasive and painful biopsy procedure. And what we have done is we've sent to look for a test that actually prevents or could remove unnecessary biopsies from your schedule and hopefully do something that's far less invasive and easier to do, and that's a blood test. And this is what we call OmniGraph. OmniGraph is designed to help prevent unnecessary biopsies for patients and rule out subclinical acute rejection. So what is OmniGraph specifically? Well, this is a blood test that helps your doctor get to the earliest and most accurate view about your health for your transplanted kidney. This test can lead your doctor to understand whether or not your kidney is healthy and well, or if it's at risk of rejection. And so what we've done here on the innovative side at TGI is to create a test that combines two types of biomarkers: the donor-derived cell-free DNA, which is called TRAC, and a gene expression profile, which is called TrueGraph. We know that donor-derived cell-free DNA measures the amount of DNA found in your bloodstream that's released from your transplanted kidney. So when the kidney is undergoing any sort of damage, typically cells tend to die. And then what happens is that the DNA from the donor gets dumped into the recipient bloodstream, and we detect that through this blood test. Second to that, we have the gene expression test. And this is measuring the gene activity in our blood and figuring out whether or not our immune system is activated or if it's in a steady state of quiescence or not activated. And so using this combination of the two tests together, we provide the most comprehensive coverage that you can have in detecting subclinical rejection out there on the market today, including the highest positive predictive value and the highest negative predictive value of both markers together. So we have TrueGraph and TRAC together as OmniGraph. So one of the things that I'll mention before handing it over to Shane is that in addition to being a data-driven company, we're a company that we care about our patients, we care about coverage, and we do understand that during transplantation and post-transplantation monitoring, that it can be a costly endeavor. So TGI is committed to providing testings ordered and deemed medically necessary by a physician, regardless of our network status with private insurances. So our patient financial assistance program is designed to tailor solutions for uninsured or underinsured patients based on individual circumstances. In certain circumstances, specifically defined or depending on where the patient's financial status and the applicable law goes in place, we may adjust some or all laboratory charges if the patient cannot afford to pay for their testing. So it's important that as patients that you advocate for yourselves out there and understand that in addition to these tests being out there as hopefully to avoid unnecessary biopsies, there's also a patient financial assistance program that TGI is committed to helping patients navigate billing, pre-authorizations, reimbursement questions, and we can be reached at the phone number below at 844-878-4723. All right, and I think I will hand it over to Shane, one of our patient ambassadors, and I thank you for that part. Shane, go ahead.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Justin. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to have the opportunity to be here and share my story with you. This is going to be something that's going to be, a little raw for me. It is very much part of my daily life, and there may be times when I get a little choked up. I want to say happy Thursday and also happy St. Patrick's Day on this nice Thursday that we have today. My story is not my own. It is very much a story of people in my life and how those different relationships have got me to where I am now, especially having a good friend that have given me a kidney. As my story started, this little brief outline and everything, I'd met my friend Joey, who gave me a kidney back in 1993. We played baseball together, graduated together, went to college together, and spent a lot of our life together and everything. I do apologize. I'm already getting choked up and it's not even started yet. And throughout life, we spent time together, which sent my trajectory into a different path that I thought I'd ever be in, which caused me to go to nursing and have some different life experiences. As you can tell, Joey and I started playing baseball together, and I'm a big movie buff as well. So you may see a nod to some other movies throughout this presentation. Joey and I always connected playing baseball. This was the first time I had met him in 1993. And, when you meet somebody and they're just a huge part of your life and you get gravitated towards somebody. And Joey was always that person for me. you can see on the picture to the right here, that's us playing baseball in one of my grandparents' backyards. And to the left, you'll see us, the picture there with our next team that we played for. That's how we met. As life happens, we grew up and graduated college. Joey, as you can see, he's got the ETBU with duct tape written on his hat. How Joey always knew what he wanted to do, and I had no clue. I was trying to figure it out and everything, but Joey always had his life ahead of him. He had a plan, and he knew where he was going. And I was thankful that he was there to help me out and everything. And I'm going to take a minute. The gentleman in the graduation picture to the far right, he was one of the family members that was alluded to on being checked for. That's my cousin Jonathan there. And I was very fortunate that he had been able to be tested to try to give me a kidney as well. On the far right picture there, that's us in college and everything in the same fraternity. You can see Joey on the top left and me on the bottom right. These moments together definitely shaped my life, as I just happened to come out of the wreck. The wreck happened in 2000, and this picture on the far right wasn't too far after that. We, while I was in the hospital after waking up from surgery on dialysis, because before I was fine. I didn't have any issues at all. And then eventually that developed from massive blood loss into permanent kidney damage. What happened after that sent my life into a trajectory. And since that moment, being in the ICU on dialysis, Joey always told me, hey, man, if you ever need a kidney, I'm your guy. And I thought to myself, I was like, man, I appreciate that, but that was so foreign to me at the time. I was 20 years old and really didn't understand, the gravity of what my future was going to hold. As you can tell, this is me in the one of my hospital rooms. I had some pleural effusion that I had developed from the kidney damage. What is pleural effusion? Yes, that's just some fluid that developed in between my lung and the my rib cage and everything. So they went in with the needle and pulled all that out. But as you can tell, as the kidney disease started, that there was a lot of issues that had developed because of those things, fluid retention and whatnot. And it was in those moments that I didn't realize the gravity of what Joey had told me was that he would give me a kidney. And as you can see, that was going to be some foreshadowing for things to come. As life happened, I eventually went to nursing school, as I knew I was going to be having chronic health issues at the time. My creatinine in that picture right there was about 2.3. I'd had permanent kidney damage from the hypovolemic shock or the massive blood loss and everything. And moving throughout life with Joey and the fraternity, and we went to the same college, knowing that I wanted to help people and I wanted to connect with people that were in the same situations that I had been, because being in the room or being in the bed on opposite sides of the needles, if you will, really changed my life. And connecting with other patients and other people that are going through tragedies or life events was what I wanted to do. So I finished nursing school, moved to Houston. Joey had met his wife. They got married, had 2 lovely daughters, and our lives still were connected. He would come down to Houston sometimes, and I would go back to my hometown area, which is Marshall, Texas, to see Joey and see different family members and everything. And as life happened, I got different experiences in my nursing career, and eventually in 2014 is when my kidneys finally gave up the ghost, if you will. I was at work, and as the disease progressed, I was getting more and more tired. I had a lot more fluid buildup. Stomach was swelling because I wasn't able to get all of the fluid off, and I wasn't able to think as fast because of the filtering that my kidneys weren't doing. Definitely affected the way I thought. So eventually, I started doing home hemodialysis. And why home hemo, you ask? when I was working in the ICU, in the cardiac ICU, I learned how to use this machine. And so my doctor that I worked with in the ICU, my nephrologist or kidney doctor, he he said, Shane, this would be a great thing for you to do. You don't have to, you can do this at home. You can set your own time. You can do this whenever, throughout the day, and you don't have to worry about going to center or anything like that. You can set the pace on your own. It's a more of a gentle pull. You're going to have to do a little bit more often, but it's going to be something that I would prefer you to do because the benefits outweigh the risk for you to do this at home. So I agreed, and this is on the picture on the left is me doing some training in the center, and then on the right is me doing it at home, and keeping a positive outlook and everything was hard. I'm not gonna lie. Going through all of these changes in life and everything through something that I had no control in was hard, and having chronic illness is something that, dealing with that at this point for 14 years from 2000 to 2014, wasn't easy. However, I was very fortunate in the life choices that I made to be able to get me, through all of this point. From this time, my not only my mother, but I'd had two cousins being pictured. One you saw Jonathan in the graduation picture a few slides ago, and then also his brother Sean tried to be tested, and because of different reasonings, my team felt that it was better for me to get somebody outside of the family. Well, Joey got tested, and in 2015, the transplant happened. Throughout this time between Joey getting tested and everything, his father had passed away. Joey being Joey, I'd asked him, hey Joey, you don't have to do this. I tried to talk him out of it, doing the transplant several times because of events that have happened in his life, and I didn't, as much as I loved him. Also, it's just hard to sometimes receive that gift that that people in our lives can give up. Picture on the left there was right before we went into surgery and everything, and the picture on the right was us after surgery. It was funny in that picture on the left, Joey. I remember him getting some sedation and everything, and being a little loopy and goofy, which made me laugh a little bit. The picture on the right was us in post-op or PACU area, both doing well. And I was scared going into the transplant, right? Because you're always afraid of the what is, and maybe it's not going to work. Maybe maybe there's going to be complications, right? And my surgeon that did the transplant, he said as soon as they unclamped Joey's kidney, that I immediately started producing a ton of urine, and I'd put out over a liter in less than an hour. So very fortunate that it happened the way it did. That's a little shout out to or a nod to Star Wars, if you will. But on the left, that's the picture of Joey and I. I went to change different hospitals and became a liver transplant coordinator. In the picture on the right are some of my transplant coordinators that I'd had and some mentors and stuff in life. And life went forward. I had no issues on paper. Everything looked great. I had no problems at all. And everything seemed fine. From a transplant standpoint, I felt great. I got back into exercising because I felt great. I didn't have to worry about my catheter or anything. That was able to be pulled. Everything was going great. And then moved up to Dallas, so I had to transfer to a different transplant center. And as a patient, it's weird moving homes, if you will, from a team that had seen you from the beginning to going to another team that doesn't know you at all, and learning their different processes and everything, because it's different moving centers, right? Each center is going to be different on how they do things and everything. Well, as life happened, I was at the 5-year annual, and I'd asked for some cell-free DNA testing. And my doctor, how it happened was I had done some training because I'm a or a heart transplant coordinator, and I hadn't had any of the cell-free DNA testing or genomic testing for me at all. And I asked for it on a whim because I'd just gone through a course and my doctor was writing with a pen from that company, and I asked if I could have one, and he tried to awkwardly hand me a pen, and I said, "No, could I get the test?" And he said, "Yeah, Shane." It's like I'm a nerd. I just kind of want to see, if I have any cell-free DNA. Everything's been great, but I want to see. Lo and behold, that showed some elevated cell-free DNA. And what is that? That's, as Juston talked about earlier, it's the comparison between my DNA and Joey's DNA. And it was really elevated, much more so where my nephrologist at my new home called me and said, "Hey, Shane, we need you to bring you in for some more testing." So the antibody testing and everything, then we had to do a biopsy, which showed subacute clinical rejection. That's a fancy name for saying everything on paper looked fine, but there was some stuff going on under the surface, right? We do a lot of these tests as like smoke alarms and detection to see how the kidneys or different, organs that we get transplanted are doing. And mine had something going on, so much so that it wasn't showing on paper, but it was causing a lot of other problems under the surface. So as you can see, the picture on the left, that's not dialysis. It's similar. It's called plasma exchange, where you're doing a plasma, taking my plasma out, putting new plasma in, and giving different medications to help suppress my immune system. And why plasma exchange? Because that's where the antibodies and stuff are. So it's a multi-pronged approach to try to treat rejection. So we did more testing after the first treatment, and as you can see on the right picture, that was some more treatment that I had to do after the first round, to try to get everything a little bit more under control. And as you can tell, why I'm putting some pictures and numbers and everything, because everything's number based, right? In the medical field, we like to know, we want to know our creatinine or whatever. On that bottom graph there, you can see my creatinine has been stable. There has been no issues. And that top line, you can see that there's the cell-free DNA, the first with a few different companies, and the far right, the 1.56 and the 5.8 has been the track, or the other the cell-free DNA that I'm using now. And you can tell that it's had a little bit of change to it. Also, that middle line there you see in red is some very specific tests for the antibodies and everything to see how they are. As you can tell, they're still a little elevated. But on that bottom line there, you see the stars and everything. That's with TrueGraph, and you can tell that I've been TX. What does that mean to me? It means that it's been, what we're doing is working. I don't need more treatment. There's going to be some fluctuations in cell-free DNA. As a transplant coordinator, we kind of expect some fluctuations. We just want to see if it goes back up and comes back down, with further testing. And I'm actually due for another test, so the slide will need to be updated here in the next few weeks after my new testing. So what does all of this mean? I'm showing you numbers. I've told you my story, but what does that mean moving forward? Life doesn't stop. This is a picture from October of last year. Joey, we all went kayaking. We went to a place in South Texas, kind of close to Beaumont. Life moves forward. The story doesn't end. Adventures don't have to end. Someone always has to carry on the story. That's a line that is from Lord of the Rings trilogy. But I'm also sharing you a piece of my life. And I hope in some way that not only being a patient, but also a coordinator, and how seeing my life change and going from pre-dialysis to dialysis into transplant and treatment for that gives you an overview. Because when I was on dialysis, I had no clue about this stuff. Yes, I was a nurse, but I had no clue about cell-free DNA testing or gene expression, or what that could potentially mean for me years down the road. But this, again, my story is not one of my own. It's been heavily influenced not only by friends, but also the fortunate grace of a good friend of mine, Joey. I'm more than welcome to answer any questions that you may have, if you have any or want to know some specifics. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. I do apologize that I did get choked up a little bit through all of this, but thank you for your time, and thank you so much for listening. And I hope in some way that I've impacted and maybe have helped you out understand what you may eventually go through, or potentially help from keep happening, or provide a little bit of insight on things that you may not understand before transplant or after transplant.
Thank you so much, Shane, for sharing your kidney disease and your transplant journey so candidly with us. And I'm glad to hear that things are going well for you. And thank you to Juston for educating us on silent rejection. This was a great presentation. Thank you both. We will now take a few questions that were sent in to us ahead of the webinar, and we will start out with some questions for Juston. Is this test working on trying to make kidneys last longer?
So that's a great question. That's exactly what our hope is at TGI. That's what our long-term goal is at TGI, is to not only provide an opportunity for monitoring to understand where the patient is on their kidney health journey, where they are potentially on the spectrum of rejection, but also to provide the earliest detection possible so that the intervention can come through and therapies can help extend the life of the graft. So that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Another question for you. Does silent rejection mean the patient has no outward symptoms? Why is it called silent?
Yeah, also a good question. So in general, what we understand about subclinical rejection is that, again, there's the normal way of monitoring a patient, the traditional markers that we use like serum creatinine. Those markers do not indicate when silent rejection or subclinical rejection is happening. We call it silent rejection because essentially all outward appearances are that the patient seems to be fine. There's no indication that they're not doing well. And in the past, traditionally, surveillance biopsy has been the only way to identify the subclinical acute rejection patients and intervene at that time. And so really that's why it's called silent, is because nothing is really presented in the traditional labs or the traditional biomarker or there's no abnormalities that we see. And so, and again, in that particular context, you don't know what's happening until it's already too late. And so this is what TrueGraph is trying to do, and this is what OmniGraph is trying to do, is to be able to capture that.
Thank you, Juston. And so can you share a little bit more about the differences between silent rejection and long-term or chronic rejection? Are they the same? Are they different?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, subclinical rejection is something that we think of that does happen early on, but early on could be a relative term. That, again, as I mentioned earlier, that we can see subclinical rejection happening even 2 years post-transplant. The chronic rejection is something that tends to be episodic, that happens long-term and also happens frequently, maybe after treatment and then having another event and so on and so forth. And so when we think about rejection, in addition to thinking about subclinical rejection and thinking about clinical acute rejection, there is two other types of rejection within those buckets that we think of rejection, and that's T-cell mediated rejection and antibody mediated rejection. So one of the things that we think about is the reason that we designed OmniGraph the way that we did by combining two different biomarkers is in part because one biomarker, which is our cell-free DNA, picks up antibody-mediated rejection a lot better than the gene expression test does, and the gene expression test picks up T-cell mediated rejection a lot better than it does antibody-mediated rejection. And so the idea is that we combine the two of these tests into one test now, one blood tube, one blood draw. So instead of having multiple vials of blood, that's one 6 ml tube that's being filled up, where we do 2 tests out of this, and we're trying to pick up on as much rejection as we possibly can, including T-cell antibody-mediated rejection, but also thinking about subclinical rejection and hopefully preventing that turning into clinical acute rejection, which can progress into chronic rejection down the line.
Thank you for explaining that. How did somebody get started with this testing?
So that's a great question. I think the most important thing is to have a conversation with your physician about what your options are out there. Biomarkers are an exciting and an innovative space right now. And again, the ultimate design of what we believe our goal is here at TGI and what we want to do with biomarkers and in this particular space is provide an opportunity for patients to avoid unnecessary biopsies. Outside of costs and outside of the complications that come from that, there's also just the simple fact that they're painful, they're uncomfortable, and it does take away from quality of life when you're having to spend your time getting these biopsies. So how do you get started? Have this conversation with your physician. Be an advocate for yourself about what's out there. And part of that is looking at these sorts of opportunities from advocacy groups and patient advocacy groups that are educating patients to understand what their options are. And so it's a simple blood test. It's a simple blood draw. It can be done when you're doing routine labs. And as Shane indicated, he had a conversation with his physician and said, hey, I would like to try this. And this is how he got started in that. And I encourage others to do their due diligence and research, and also find out if this would be the right test for them to avoid some of those complications and unnecessary biopsies.
Thank you so much, Justin. And now I have a few questions for Shane. Shane, what does the OmniGraph test mean to you? And I know you shared a little bit about that, but we'd love to hear some more from you.
Sure, I alluded to it, pardon me, in the presentation a little bit before. What it does for me, being in both worlds, not only as a patient, but also as a transplant coordinator, I know that what we're doing doesn't require further treatment. It gives me a chance to know that I have good information, and it is a black and white test. The OmniGraph gives us not only cell-free DNA, but also the TrueGraph gives us an understanding of, do I need more treatment? And with the OmniGraph saying that I'm TX, or the TrueGraph saying that I have TX, which means I don't need any more treatment. And we can watch the levels with the track and see if there's elevation in cell-free DNA to see if that could potentially be where I need more treatment. But right now, it helps me sleep at night knowing that I'm covered in what I'm doing and what my team is doing is appropriate, taking my meds, doing what I need to do, and taking care of the gift that Joey gave me.
Thank you, Shane. What are your suggestions for someone who may be watching this webinar and hearing about TrueGraph and OmniGraph for the first time? How should they start the conversation with their healthcare team?
I think it definitely depends on where someone is in their journey. Obviously, this would be a nice earmark for somebody that's pre-transplant, non-dialysis, looking forward to getting a transplant. Somebody that has been transplanted, as you can tell in my journey and what Justin has spoken about before, we're trying to catch the fire before it starts. We're trying to catch the fire before it burns the house down. And a lot of times, by the time that our creatinine starts elevated, or we have symptoms, or we use the term symptomatic in healthcare, we're trying to catch the things before that becomes the problem. We're trying to catch the house before it burns down. So these are like the smoke alarms to those things. So I definitely do your due diligence. If you're not getting any cell-free DNA testing or genomic expression testing at your center, I would definitely ask about it, because as you can tell with my own story, that my creatinine has been stable, my function has been great. However, there's been things under the surface that fire under the surface that could potentially cause more problems down the road. And that's what we alluded to earlier about chronic rejection and everything, is subacute can lead that way. So the more that you can get information to stop that from happening on the front side, the better that it's going to be.
Thank you. And I have one final question for you, Shane. What tips do you have for other kidney transplant recipients who are trying to advocate for better care?
I would definitely say, do some reading. There are tons of support groups out there. This is your journey. Unfortunately, a lot of our team is not on this side of the needle, if you will. So doing what you need to do for yourself, whether it's learning, attending these types of seminars, the amount of information that we have today is incredible on treatment and knowing what's out there and trying to prevent treatment from happening to see what's going on. I would definitely say read and attend seminars like this, because the more that you have to bring to the table, the better it's going to be for you as a patient. Because at the end of the day, it's your journey. It is your life. And then if you have to get retransplanted or go through treatment, it's you that are going through that. So definitely advocate, push, learn, and pick your team's brain on what's available and what they use at your center.
Thank you so much. And Juston, I'd like to bring you back on and ask if there are any closing thoughts or words that you'd like to share with our audience.
Oh yeah. Again, thank you for putting this on, and thank you for everybody for your attention and listening out there. Again, I think for TGI and what we are advocating for is that we are strongly trying to move the needle, so to speak, on improving outcomes for patients, and those patient outcomes, and keeping graft survival and keeping the grafts even longer, to close the gap that we know that there's a huge gap of the need versus donation. And so that's one of the spaces that we try to focus on is our innovation, to be able to push through and ask some questions. And sometimes they're out of the box questions, and sometimes there are paradigm shifting questions that we're just trying to really, instead of taking a no for an answer, asking why not? Why can't we do something? Why can't we try to do something? And really, again, just push the boundaries that are available for us in the community, but medical space. And I would also say that it's incredibly gratifying, but also great to hear from patient Shane and the advocacy he's doing as well, that he's taking his care into his own hands. And unfortunately, as he said, multiple times, it is your journey as a patient. And so, the best patient advocate is yourself. And the best that we can do is everybody push to have options and to have alternatives and to have the best possible care that's out there. And hopefully we can be part of the solution and provide, again, peace of mind moving forward with what we're doing on biomarkers and our innovation.
Thank you. Thank you again, Juston, Shane. This was a wonderful presentation. We appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us today. If anyone has a question we did not get to during today's webinar, please reach out to us at info@aakp.org, and we will work with today's speakers to provide a response. We hope you have found this webinar informational, and I would like to close with a few slides about additional resources that may be of interest to you. If you are not already a member of AAKP, we encourage you to join us. We offer free membership for patients and family members, as well as living kidney donors. You can become a free member online or by phone, and in order to receive all the benefits of membership, please be sure to include your email address when signing up. As an AAKP member, you will be notified by email when opportunities arise where your opinions and experiences are needed to help inform innovation, advance care, and make a meaningful impact to improve lives. We encourage you to respond to our flash surveys and other engagement opportunities to help us elevate the patient voice and change the status quo for kidney disease care. You can also select to receive any of our 5 different electronic newsletters and subscribe to our print magazine, AAKP Renal Life. We also invite you to follow us on our blog and social media for all the latest news and announcements. AAKP is dedicated to helping patients understand their condition and take control of their health care. We are proud to offer a variety of resources for both patients and caregivers. We also offer numerous kidney-friendly recipes with details on the nutritional content and which stage of kidney disease these recipes are good for. By visiting our website and clicking on the store button at the top of the homepage, you can find a variety of educational brochures and online tools to order or download, and you can also order materials by phone. Please save the dates for our 2022 signature events: our Global Innovation Summit with George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences, our annual Policy Summit, and our annual National Patient Meeting. We encourage you to visit our on-demand webpage where you can find educational sessions from our previous programs. We'd again like to thank Juston Weems and Shane Moore for their time today, and to Eurofins Transplant Genomics for sponsoring this AAKP HealthLine Innovator webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Be informed and stay safe.